England. We need to beat them on Tuesday now to get into the last four.
Yeah, they do. I was talking in studio, myself and Ian were talking about it. The old days of Fiji just throwing the ball around, and he was saying he's often seen Samoan teams warm up and they just throw a ball in and they just go for it. Those days are gone because, as I said, the Super Rugby, you have Fiji Drua in it, and they're getting a bit more structure around the game. So they have that threat, obviously, with that offloading and how they have the ability to play from anywhere on the pitch, so they do pose that, but they're a lot more structured and you can see they're well coached. I feel like Ireland will be far too strong for them, but they definitely gave Australia a shock in that first game. I think it was only in the last maybe 10 minutes that Australia pulled away from them and got that win in the end.
Sam Prendergast is a very talented out half for Ireland. What skills does he have?
I think last week or the last game Australia, he might have been under a little bit of pressure regarding his kicking game, because from the tee in the first game he missed 4, which was unusual to see. There's been a lot of talk about him, rightly so, but it puts a lot of pressure on him to be good in all areas of the game. And I think after that first game, Australia, I'd say Richie Murphy took him aside, told to relax, because we know he's the ability. He's a beautiful spiral kick. But what's impressed me most, John, is his control of the pack and his ability to play both on the gain line and kind of stay deep as well. Especially in that Australia game, we saw him really pulling the strings. He'd a different centre partnership outside him, and he was able to just control them so well. He takes the ball right up. He's able to pull it back, and he's got this amazing kind of loop pass that just skips out players and gets wide. So he's got a lot of good aspects to his game, and I think this tournament in particular, we'll see him kick on another notch again. As I said, he looked a slight bit nervous in that first game, really came into it in Australia, and I think Fiji will see him let loose. We'll see a lot more kicking from him than we have done.
Is it pie in the sky, Fiona, because there's been such an issue around the succession stakes with Johnny Sexton and who's the number 10 going to be going into the future, and Jack Crowley seems to be the flavour of the month at the moment. Is it madness to think this guy could be in a World Cup squad for Ireland at senior level?
No, it's not madness in the future. I mean, you're looking at that talent. I think that's the thing about him, John, is that everyone sees that kind of Johnny Sexton in him. In that first game against England, he got in under the ball and he held that ball up twice for a maul. It's very unusual. You'd see a 10 get stuck into that nitty-gritty area of the game, and Johnny has the ability to do that. He tackles really low, and he throws himself about the place. He's tall in height, but he doesn't have a huge frame, but he really gets in the midst of it. So I think we are doing a lot of talk about it, and there's more and more pressure. I'm sure he's listening to this. He's been compared to the 10. He's still quite young. It's whether he'll get, I think the big thing is whether next season we'll see him get that game time, because we know that there's guys ahead of him in Leinster at the minute, but whether Leo pushes him through and we'll see a lot more game time of him, because we saw it, and especially with Carberry, if you can get a couple of good games or if you have a couple of bad games, and either way, and Crowley was the same, you'll either push yourself onto a squad or you'll knock yourself off. And I think with Johnny going out, there's a lot of players looking at that, and you would imagine they'll be going for a younger out half. Crowley, Prendergast, Crowley at the minute probably has more minutes beside him, but I definitely think he's one to watch for the future if managed correctly at club.
Can we win this under-20 World Cup?
I'm actually strong. We beat them in we beat them in the Six Nations tournament, so we might be favourites going into the game, but they've picked it up another level in their last 2 games. They really, absolutely, the scoreline mightn't show up, but they walloped New Zealand off the pitch. They're so physical. They're after lifting their game. We had them down in Cork and kind of got there was a red card in that match that gave us kind of the upper hand. If we can keep going, and depending on the semi-final, I think the guys in a final might beat France, but if we catch them in the semi-final, I'm not too sure. They're very, very strong, but definitely that pack in particular are so good, and the back line. But John is well creeping into it, I suppose, with these kind of there's been a couple of players cited, and when there's someone cited, you can't bring them in if they're banned. So that squad depth is going to be very important as well going into Fiji and hopefully that semi-final.
Yeah, discipline's important. Is maybe something we need to work on a bit.
Yeah, it's kind of, you know yourself, they're cracking down on that tackle height. So it's actually quite funny when you watch, not funny, but when you watch it back, you can see that it's fatigue almost. It's coming to the latter stages of the game. I think it was probably the exact same amount of time left on the clock when McNabney had made that high tackle, and it's almost like when fatigue sets in and there's any change in direction, it's hard to lower that height. So they need to kind of probably have a look at that and trying to get that adjusted, and how they'll be able to bring that into those big moments towards the end of the game, because I thought their discipline throughout the game was fine, but it's just as it's creeping towards those latter end of the game that we can see, and it's the same with other squads, that maybe that technique goes out of your head a little bit and your body doesn't react as quick as you'd like it to.
So we're talking about the under-20s here. They play Fiji on Tuesday. The pitches, if anybody's watched this, the pitch in Pearl, now they've had bad weather there, but it's almost like, remember the bog you played Italy in the 2013 Grand Slam game?
Absolutely. They look like, some of the guys look like they're swimming. I think it was Argentina in the first game. I thought the match was over, but they just completed their warm-up, their whole jerseys, their heads, everything was covered in muck. So it's not great conditions, and it's similar, I suppose, to when I would have played in the World Cup as well, that all the games are on in the one pitch in a certain group, so you're probably looking at 3 games. So if you don't get that first game in the morning, you could be absolutely swimming or sailing around the pitch by late that evening.
It's not pleasant.
No, it doesn't look too pleasant. Now look, it suited, a lot of people thought it might suit the Australian kicking game in that match, because their kicking game has been so good and they'd looked at that in those conditions. But I thought Ireland handled the conditions perfectly, and these guys, from having played all their matches on 4G to go out onto that pitch and put in such a performance, and the nit and grit and muck of that, and so controlled and disciplined as well, was brilliant.
We're talking about the pack being so good, so are there bolters from that pack who could be maybe household names in a year or two?
Definitely. I think Gus McCarthy is someone to watch at hook, and his ability at line out time, bar maybe like 2 to 3 max throws in both games, it probably didn't go to hand, and that got to do with jumpers as well. So he's someone that's huge. I said it at the time, I don't think a lot of people are too happy whether he stays at Leinster with the quality hooker Sheena Keller that's there. That might inhibit how he progresses as well. But the back row, McNabney, Ruan Quinn, Gleeson, it's just, they have been quite outstanding. We saw Gleeson was probably injured, and that's why he didn't start that first game, so he came off the bench, but he was so explosive, and I definitely think we'll see a lot more of him in Munster. And Conor O'Tiernig in second row is another guy who's been brilliant, and obviously you can't not talk about the 2 props who I love to chat about, but Paddy McCarthy around the pitch is so good. And looking at him in the first game at tight head, I thought he might have got caught a little bit by England, but switching over to loose last week, he was immense. And unfortunately the old props never get player of the game, but he was definitely up there to get it.
Well, we know by the World Cup ahead of us in France that we have to have fit props, otherwise we're going to be in trouble. And in terms of the sevens, the men's qualify for this week for the Olympics. The women's are already qualified as well. You will have new eyeballs on rugby in Paris next year. That's the positive of the sevens.
Yeah, it's huge for the sevens. I mean, to have both teams going to that, it's so good for them. And the work rate, everything that they've done throughout the year, it's probably not televised, or people wouldn't see a lot of it because a lot of it is only streamed. But these players are pushing every week, and to come out in the men's in particular, I know they qualified last year, but every time I'm watching that team, they're getting better and better. And we could have 2 teams that could get medals next year. They both have the ability to be in that top 3, I think.
Was it the right call in that, in hindsight, to have a sevens programme for the women's in addition to the 15s?
You're trying to catch me out, John. I'll be killed. Yeah, definitely. No, definitely. Look, it's. I've always said it. It's a brilliant sport to watch. I love it. It's there. I'll always throw it on when I can. It's just the kind of, I suppose, the figuring out, especially in the women's, how, because there's so many good athletes, you know, what they want to play, how best for both teams to thrive and survive is the main thing. So yeah, it's brilliant for them. They were absolutely delighted, and rightly so. I mean, the work they've put into qualify is huge. Obviously I love the 15s game because I was a slow prop and obviously couldn't play sevens, so I want the best players in the pitch when I watch 15s, but we just need to get the balance right, and I think it's getting there definitely.
Fiona, we'll see you on Virgin Media for the rest of the under-20s, and the best of luck with it, and great chatting to you as always.
Cheers. Thanks, John. Have a good one.
Fiona Hayes there, former Ireland international, speaking about the chances of the under-20s winning this World Championship. Now, after the break, we're going to build up to the All-Ireland Senior Football quarter-final between Kerry and Tyrone. Ross Munley's at Croke Park.
Off the ball on News Talk.
Retirement is not an end.